Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya, and welcome to TFiR LaunchPad, our new show. And today we have two guests from Permiso, Paul Nguyen, co-CEO and co-founder, and Jason Martin, once again, co-CEO and co-founder. Paul, Jason, it's good to have you both on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
What challenges, what problems that you saw in the ecosystem, especially that there are already many players in this space that you are like, hey, we have to solve this problem. So let's start this company.
We set out with a couple different thoughts as we were leaving FireEye as executives. So we were running the product portfolio right before we started Permiso. And we saw a lot of trends in the industry where everything was moving to cloud. We also wanted to modernize the portfolio for FireEye. So between the two of us, we ran that global business. And so we did a lot of research. And what we saw was an opportunity to really revolutionize parts of that market because there are current incumbents today who are doing quite a bit in the cloud security market. But it's the same thing that Jason and I saw 20 years ago when the data centers were coming about. And I think the current age of cloud security is really focused on what's in my environment, how's it configured, and just that visibility of all my assets. So it's really more asset centric right now. And then the next evolution that usually comes is when the attackers see the opportunity as really ripe targets to go attack and really get a good return on their investment in terms of their time. The attacks start to mount, and then at that point you need another class of products, which will be more around the detection and response side. So Jason and I come from that background, and that's what we decided to do was let's go look at cloud security and detection and response, and that's what we left FireEye with. And then we were able to really bring on a group of world-class angel investors. Jason Chan was our first angel investor. He was the former head of security at Netflix. So we were able to get a lot of ideas from using identity plus detection and response as a way to really look at the modern way of doing cloud security. So I think we're pretty lucky to land on something that we think is pretty white space because the attacks aren't really that voluminous just yet. So I think we're on the cusp of that starting to come.
Jason, do you want to add anything to that story?
Paul and I have been in the industry for 25 plus years, so we have the luxury of being able to look back in time. And as you know, a lot of technology trends tend to repeat themselves. So what Paul was talking about in terms of that, most markets, as a technology is adopted, it's then used, and then it moves into visibility and understanding what you have running. So 20 years ago, it was things like Nessus and Nmap and scanners, and really helping companies understand what's running in their environment. And that's where the cloud security market is today. We saw the progression on-prem where it moved to detecting what was happening in those environments. Now that you know what's running, who's in there, what are they doing becomes really important. And that's what we're focused on.
The whole security landscape has changed because the workloads have changed. The way we write, deploy, and run applications have changed. There are a lot of traditional vendors who specialize in security, and then there is a new breed of players who were born in the cloud native era. So can you talk about how different is security in the cloud native era versus the traditional IT world?
You're actually touching, Swapnil, on one of the things that's really important in our founding thesis was that difference that you talked about, right? Most of the security industry and security professionals have been in the on-prem world, the kind of old world. And the engineering and product teams have accelerated into the cloud world, which is really around digital transformation and accelerating the business. The result of that is those security teams have been left behind. And so one of our core theses is in what ways can we help the classic security practitioner and people that have built great corpus of knowledge over the years, how do we help them transition into that new world, into that new cloud? How do we help them understand the frameworks that they use to secure on-prem world, how they can apply them to the cloud? Because it's the right way is not to forklift your people and process and technology into the cloud. The right way is to re-educate, relearn, and redeploy tools that are specifically for the cloud. So one of our taglines is Cloud Zero to Cloud Hero. And I'll give you an example of one thing we do. So we've broken down the profile of activity and patterns in the cloud against MITRE. And MITRE is a framework that's used broadly by security professionals everywhere. And it's a great way for them to ground what they're seeing in the cloud with an analog of what they're used to seeing in an on-prem world. And so really quickly, we're kind of, Paul has a great analogy, he calls it the Rosetta Stone, right? So how can we help them translate what they know into this new paradigm of what they really don't know? And when we started this company, we didn't just start writing code. We did over 100 customer interviews. And we found that pattern that I mentioned where they were taking security teams that were exceptional on-prem and they were just throwing them into the cloud. It was the literal deep end. And from there, they were really struggling to understand how they were supposed to secure these environments. And so that's a really core focus of ours, is how we help up-level existing talent, because it's very hard to find cloud security talent today.
Yes, I would like to know a bit about what's your Rosetta Stone analogy?
Yeah, I think when we were trained on-prem, you're used to looking at network data, host data, threat intelligence in a certain way. But when you start to go into the cloud environments, because a lot of those traditional sets of data are abstracted out because of the way AWS sets up their services, the data that you're looking at now is completely different. And so it's like learning a new language. I say, okay, I may know English, but if I have to learn Farsi, well, that's a completely different thing that I have to go and pick up from scratch. And that's literally when we're talking to security analysts, super sophisticated on-prem, go to cloud, it's like I'm completely lost. I don't know what I'm looking at. On top of that, in the term of permissions, there's 11,500 plus different permissions in AWS. Plus, that means there's 11,500 different events. So how could you possibly memorize what every one of those events does functionally from an AWS standpoint, and what does it mean in the context of security, and understanding what are the combination of events that could be indicative of an attack or being malicious? So it's that Rosetta Stone and being able to up level and reduce that learning curve for security analysts. My last company was all about security automation. So I was one of the first players in that security orchestration automation market. And what we were trying to do is up level security analysts because there wasn't enough time, and being able to scale those folks. It's both a scale issue and a translation issue right now in the cloud. So it's not just a scale. And I always joke, if you're trying to find a cloud security expert, it's like you're trying to find the tooth fairy, a Yeti, and a unicorn all blended into one, because that just doesn't exist. And we still talk about that workforce shortage today. And finding cloud security folks, I just don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So we think we're in a unique position, both being visibility as well as being a Rosetta Stone, so to speak, to help up level these folks.
Yeah, we say translating cloudish to English.
Our branding is very unique. If you've been to our website, we purposely wanted to be completely different than everyone else. So we're a little more playful, tongue-in-cheek in the way that we approach the market. We're tired of that 20 years of doom and gloom and dark branding. So if anyone comes to our website, you'll see something completely different.
Let's talk about cultural aspect of security in the cloud native world. We certainly don't have the old silos, but we do have specialized teams, and they will always be there. I tend to call them soft silos because even in today's world, most of these teams do not interact with each other. It's only when something goes wrong in an organization, then you see all the folks that work in that company. So I want to understand from cultural perspective, what does this cultural shift, cultural change, soft silos mean for security? Whose responsibility it is?
I think the shared responsibility model is very different now in that construct, because it used to be a very centralized function. I think it's becoming a lot more decentralized, and people say, okay, well, DevSecOps, and there's a whole shift left. Those are words, but I think what it ends up becoming is the responsibility for security is becoming more distributed across an organization. And with that, because folks like myself and Jason have been sitting there trying to understand the attackers and the adversary for 20 years, I think that knowledge is hard to transplant quickly to other folks that may be like developers. Actually, I started my career as a developer. I can tell you honestly, I wrote some pretty bad insecure code, and it wasn't until I became a security person and I specialized in application security that I really gained an appreciation for how do you build software securely. And so now, because we're going so fast in this cloud environment, I think people are trying to catch up as quickly as they can from a DevOps, SRE standpoint to understand how do we really secure from a preventative standpoint to ensure that we don't introduce these things into these environments. But the reality is, what Jason and I are saying is, preventative is not the only way that risk is mitigated. You need a full stack of prevention, detection, response. You have to assume also that the house will be breached at some point. And so I think today's market is very much on the prevention and it's shift left, which is great. But when we look at it, you need to have both sides of the coin. And so we obviously come from an area where we like to find evil. We like to help contain and respond to evil, and we think that's probably where we can best fit. But we also find some multi-purpose use, because the reality is when you answer the question of what's happening in my environment, that's not just useful as security. It can also be used for DevOps. Well, we didn't permission this role properly. Why is it failing? I need some tool to be able to triage those permissions. That comes up very frequently. It actually came up with a customer yesterday as well. So there is a dual purpose, probably multi-purpose use case for the product of just visibility of what's happening in my environment. Now, how you interpret that activity to be malicious from a security standpoint or a service availability issue because of a DevOps issue, same data. Interpretation is different. So maybe your Rosetta Stone's a little bit different than mine. So it's all just about translation and contextualization of that data to put it into your native language and understanding of what question you're really answering.
Yeah, a good follow up on that with Paul's context comment is, I think a lot of what we're seeing in the cloud is the context is moving, or the alerts or security alerts or operational alerts move to the team with the best context. And that's not always the security team. And a lot of times, and we've seen this both in our interviews and in principle on our platform, where in many cases, the security teams don't know what to do when something happens in the cloud. And the engineering teams end up doing the response. But like Paul said, they're not trained in security response. So they're going to do a 50% jump from a response perspective. But if a security practitioner without cloud knowledge tried to do it, they would only do a 50% response from a security perspective. So how do we blend those two together, right? We do see a lot more of these security controls being pushed down into the dev teams, into CI/CD. But when you talk to an engineer, when you sit them down, and we've done this to understand the persona, they're terrified. They're not security people. They understand the implications of failing, and it's not the job they signed up to do, nor did they study or go into that career. So it's how do you create these tools that help both of these personas come together, collaborate, and respond effectively? That's the challenge, I think, today. It's not just throwing tools at them.
Cloud native is very complicated by design, and cloud native security is even more complicated and challenging. So while you don't want to draw a gloomy picture of cloud security, there are some real challenges that make people sweat.
Well, I mean, I think you're right, right? There's so many different aspects of not just traditional technology, but now cloud technology that require bespoke tooling, right? There's this idea of, let me sell you a big platform. All the big vendors want to sell you a platform. But the reality is if you look at the trend of security and just technology overall, there's a period, there's an era of bespoke products that solve very discrete problems. And then there's that area of consolidation. So I think in cloud, we're really still in that area of understanding the nuances of the problem space, understanding how teams are operating in this space and what the challenges are that they have, whether it's DevOps, SRE, engineering, security teams. And then, I think some of the talent shortage, it's really exacerbated by the fact that the tools are terrible, right? So not only do you have people that aren't necessarily very knowledgeable in the space, but then you give them a bunch of different tools that do a bunch of different things, and you force them to try to draw their conclusions together. Our premise is that with very elegant design, proper design, with the right information provided to the customer of our product at the right time, we can help solve that, right? Because we can shorten the amount of time that they need to make a decision on if the thing that's happening in their environment is good, bad, policy violation, or something else. I think we've seen the security industry in a whole over all the time I've been in it has done a real disservice to the users of their products. The difference in an experience that I get using a commercial app, a consumer app on my phone even, is in so many ways richer than the experience I get using an enterprise security tool that rarely cares about who I am as a user, rarely cares about my experience in the product, maybe gets me to an answer. So we think there's an opportunity to reduce some of that, fatigue, some of that confusion by trying to really build this cohesive experience in the product. And that's one of our core principles, really deeply going into trying to understand. Paul, coming from his orchestration background, has that concept of the OODA loop, which is observe, orient, decide, and act. Today, in the cloud, what we observe with our customers is they have to go to 15, 20 different places, log sources that are completely disaggregated to understand even the beginning of what's happening in their environment. And so we believe we can shorten the entire loop of observe, orient, decide, and act by just bringing information together, presenting it in the right way, and giving it to them at their fingertips in an elegant way. So,
what are the specific areas of security that you folks deal with? Is it about IAM? Is it about permissions? What is your focus? Where is your focus?
We don't necessarily focus on the life cycle of identities and being able to manage the creation to the modification or the deletion of those credentials or those identities. Where we're focused is where can we detect the abuse and misuse of those credentials, either by external threat actors, because that's the number one vector today in cloud, is exposed secrets. It is not intentional by any means where developers expose keys in repos, or we had one where they baked it into an app and published it to the store. They didn't mean to do that, but it happens. And when you have keys that are running at the volume that we're seeing in these environments, like thousands and thousands of keys, there is going to be an incident where that happens. So we think of that as a credential that we would monitor to ensure, is there some abnormal behavior related to it that could be indicative of Jason stole the key, he's misusing it, he's spinning up some EC2 instances, he's crypto mining. How does that get detected? Or Jason's now traversing S3 buckets, he's enumerating them. All of a sudden, he's starting to try to create pipes back to another source to exfil that data. That's malicious. So the question is, how can you use identity as a methodology to really detect evil in these environments? So it's not about, because that's the way it happens. Infrastructure does not get spun up unless it's some credential that does it. So credential really is a subset of an identity, right? So, and in the context of cloud, you could have several different credentials, which I'm a big Marvel nerd, so I'll call it the multiverse. But each credential in of itself is its own existence in its own universe that has its own timeline. And you have to be able to discretely track each of those timelines and credentials to be able to convict whether, oh, well, that timeline went bad. All of a sudden they're doing something that's abnormal. So it, like I said, it's not really about managing credentials and identities. It's about finding the abuse of those by external and internal threat actors that introduces risk to your environment. That's the key. And we think it's a pretty innovative approach to detection. Jason and I have built detection products for endpoint, network, email, malware analysis. We had a massive portfolio of detection products at FireEye. And given that some of the methodologies we saw from a lot of the more sophisticated, I'd say cloud native companies like Netflix, which we have 3 angel investors who are former Netflix folks. So we got a lot of concepts and lessons learned from those folks. So I think it's taking that now to the masses and taking what is very artisan and bringing that more mainstream and available to everyone else in the rest of the market.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the market today on identity is cloud identity entitlement management. That's where you see budget and categorization. We're not that. If you think of the progression of identity in the cloud, it's, I can ask you, Swapnil, like, who's in your environment? Okay, most companies, they'll say, oh, I can get that data. Great. Okay, well, what permissions they have? Okay, I can get that data. I'm taking a little while and really understand it because of the complexity of cloud, where roles can assume roles. There's this whole transitive issue. Maybe they'll get to that answer. Then you start saying, what are they doing in your environment? Well, that gets trickier because identities assume credentials that do things. And then they go, well, how long do I have to answer that? And then you land on, well, would you know if it was doing something it shouldn't be doing, or breaking a policy, or being used maliciously, or compromised? And then they're like, probably not. And that's the progression that we try to answer, right? So the market today, who's in my environment, what are their permissions, and how do I manage that? That's the posture side of it. We're on the runtime side of it. What are those things actively being used for, and is it of concern to you or not?
What kind of growth plans do you have?
Well, it's one of those journeys that didn't occur overnight. It's been 2 years in the making, and we spent a year. We did close to almost 200 customer interviews to get to the point where Jason and I found a problem that we wanted to be passionate about. Honestly, we've done this before. This is not our first time founding companies. We've sold our companies, both our companies, to FireEye. And we really wanted just to find something that we could solve that our customers would value and not be artificially pressured into accelerating into sales and hurry up and go sell the product. And so we're pretty diligent around that. And we didn't raise a round until we felt like there was a right time for the market to be ready within about 18 to 24 months. Because I could tell you I was 3 years too early on the orchestration market last time. Man, too early is not great. You end up educating a lot of that market. the signals we were getting from our customers that we were talking to was it's just on the cusp. So we're not too early. It's going to be just right in about a year and a half. And once we understood the problem space we wanted to tackle, we started hiring. We had about 15 people coming out of the end of last year. We raised a round that you saw the announcement earlier this year as well. And now it's all about accelerating product. We want to triple our engineering team. We just hired a new head of threat research for us. And he was formerly the head of advanced practices for Mandiant. So he spent 9 years at Mandiant doing a lot of incident response, building out their detections. So and Jason and I have known him for quite a while. So we're pretty happy to be bringing him on board. And we've had another 2 folks that joined that team. So we'll be launching a new branding around that new team that's joined us. But really, we're fortunate to have folks with that level of expertise to come and be a part of our threat research team. That's it. I mean, we're not going to go mass market sales and hire 100 salespeople to go bother all of these customers. Right now, it's about finding a way to build the product a lot faster and all the features that we want to build.
I just would iterate that we've been really able to hire aggressively. So we'll exit this quarter at about 25. And it's really about product market fit, working with our design partners, our prospect customers. And it's great. We go into meetings and we say, we're not here to sell anything right now. We're here to really understand and go on this journey with you. And we have a few customers that are very sophisticated, and there's things that we're working on for them. And then we have a lot of customers that are in their journey and learning and adapting to the cloud, and we're helping them go across that. A lot of products will build for the expert, but then you don't know how to help the rest of the market. And we learned this at Mandiant and FireEye. You build for 1%, you get 1% of the market. So we want to really be able to understand and build and recruit customers that are in every area of their evolution in cloud and cloud security, so we can learn along with them.
Since you are a Marvel fan, no pun intended, what is your end game with this company? Are you planning to sell it like your other ventures, or you want to build it as your company?
The timeline is to be determined. So it depends if you've watched the more recent ones with Loki and the time traveling. But we have no preconceived notion of what this is. We are having fun. We have great people that we're working with. That's the number one thing, is I want to wake up going to work, really enjoying the people that I'm with, and working with customers that we can really solve some problems for. There is no we've been there, right? We've sold our companies before. This one's all about, let's do something fun. We've done the grind before, and we've done the corporate job for 4 years, and we've been the big company executives. We want fun. After doing that, we want to have fun. That's it.
Yeah, we always like you build a good business, you have all kinds of options, right? You don't build a good business, you have no options. So focus is avoid all the mistakes Paul and I made previously. And that's the nice thing about not being a first-time founder is knowing kind of what's normal, what's not normal, the emotions that go along with that. Having a great partner like Paul, I'll have a bad day, he picks me up. He has a bad day, I pick him up. So we're just enjoying the journey right now, and who knows where it will lead, but we're excited about that.
And that's why we do co-CEOs, because being a CEO is a lonely job. If you're sitting, I said this time around, I don't need to be CEO, but I'd rather work with a partner. We could both be doing our own separate things, but I think it's that trust and that relationship that we've built. And I try to quit being CEO every day and be the janitor, but he won't let me.
Likewise.
Can you talk about what kind of use cases are there? Who are your users?
The biggest learnings that we've had is, no surprise given our backgrounds, is we've been working some incidents lately with various customers. And what you end up seeing the pattern around, and it's just what I talked about before, is exposed secrets, exposed keys that are inadvertently or somehow maliciously compromised through different means. One was a patching issue. There's a Log4j issue that ended up being a compromised credential as a part of that TTP. So that's where we have found our number one use case is if someone, and by the way, we talked to folks at AWS as well, and they're saying they're notifying folks thousands of times a day that their account's compromised. And we had one customer that it happened to. And at that point, it's the customer's responsibility to go figure out, well, what happened? How do I contain it? How do I mitigate it? And what do I do to prevent it from happening again? AWS will not do that for you. So, and it's not like they're supposed to, but that's where we can be a stopgap for our customers to say, yes, we found this key. Let's quickly understand what this key has been doing in the environment. And let's understand if it's also created other keys or other persistence where they're trying to keep footholds into the environment. And let's make sure we contain that, because if you miss one of those footholds, they can still get back in. So that's all based upon credentials, right? You need credentials to get back into the environment. So we're able to scope that and help our customers contain it. And that's been the number one. We've been doing a bunch of these in the last 6 weeks since we launched. And all of a sudden when we launched, everyone's like, oh, we get what you're doing. We don't have that visibility into our environment. Can you come help us? And so I think we have other classes of products that we are partnering with. Actually, Jason and I invest in some of these companies as well. Their whole sole purpose is to go out and find secrets in Git repos, Salesforce, wherever those repositories can be. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to help figure out if those keys have been used for malicious purposes and how do you respond to those. So that's been our number one. We have other use cases too, where our customers like CISOs say, I think most of our folks are logging in through Okta and they're using MFA, but I'm not 100% sure. And then we unveil the report and it's like, oh no, actually half of them are using Okta and half of them are logging in directly. So your assumptions around what your access profile is different. So we're still triangulating on the major use cases outside of the exposed secret, but that's been the biggest one from a detection and IR standpoint.
What is the importance of partnership for the company, and what kind of partnerships?
Yeah, partnerships are going to be a key part. I built an orchestration company, right? All we did was integrate with APIs from every single company. I actually joke with Jason all the time because he charged me $15,000 to buy a FireEye box to integrate with, not for resale purposes. He hasn't paid me back yet, but I'm still waiting for that check. But I think partnerships are going to be important for us because we need additional context. It's not necessarily about we need to integrate with a company for XYZ. We want to be able to have the most comprehensive, robust picture of what's happening in your environment. And sometimes there's telemetry that we don't have as a part of what we do, and we're better to part for it. I'll give you an example. Okta is a company that we're talking to because as a part of the authentication chain, if they're coming in through single sign-on, you have to see the single sign-on source through the IDP, and how does that single sign-on transaction occur with AWS? So you need both the identity provider side plus the cloud service provider side. And there's other use cases that we have with integrating with Jenkins, with the CI/CD pipeline and Git. We will integrate with all of those, but it's more for context, not for any other reason than let's get better visibility and telemetry into the environment so we can really find that evil and help our customers understand what it is. What do you need to do about it? Here's how you stop it.
Yeah, and I think data sources, what we're finding is because we do storytelling really well in the product, and you can retroactively apply Permiso to data. And so we've talked to Splunk and Snowflake and some of the larger data repositories as well. And I think the tooling we're seeing is probably going to be very helpful for managed detection and response offerings. I think a lot of the MDR companies are built around the legacy old world tooling and are lacking this kind of new cloud visibility for detection and response.
Who would you consider your direct competitor?
I think a perceived competitor for us right now is the legacy SIEM market, because at a topical level, well, you're collecting similar information, therefore they should be able to do the same thing. But as you know, technology doesn't work that simply, right? Just because you have the same data doesn't mean you're able to run the same analytics or be able to present the data in a way that makes it more conducive for you to quickly understand what's happening. And so you have the classic SIM players like Splunk. You have some of the folks who are, oh, is this like UEBA, user entity behavior analysis, which is a former class of product, which was very identity centric in the sense that you're looking for potentially insider threat and anomalous user behavior patterns. There's a part of that. But I think the one that we've been facing mostly is homegrown. So we've seen a lot of folks try to roll their own solutions into the area. And over time, that becomes, unless you're a Netflix or someone who really has a lot of those types of engineering resources, it becomes hard to sustain over time. And a lot of it was because they didn't have products available to them. So they had to go build something as a proxy for that capability. So I think over time, we'll probably see more natural competitors come out because the one thing I did learn last time as well is when you're first, there's other people that will follow. You can't have a market of one anyways. So there will have to be multiple competitors that will enter the market, and they'll see the same opportunities, or there'll be larger players that try to enter it as well. But us being former big company players, building in-house is not always the easiest thing to do either, because that comes with a lot of expense and risk. So I think we're in a good place. Now the question becomes, can we execute? And we've built a world-class team that we've made a lot of mistakes in the past that we've learned from, and this is the benefit of not being a first-time founder. And this is why we say we really double down on engineering, because we can paint the vision. Can you build the product? That's the second part that needs to come.
Yeah, we're very, very lucky to have our co-founder and VP of engineering, Fani Wadali. He ran large engineering organizations for us, both at FireEye, and he has experience at McAfee in the past. And our CTO, Steven Demjanenko, he was at Meraki for a long time, technical wizard, can really, really put some of the vision we have really into play and practice. And we've been really fortunate there.
Whenever companies come out of stealth, we wonder if they are creating a new category or working in an existing one. In your case, if this is a new category, why? And if it's an existing one, how do you differentiate yourself from existing players?
Well, I've had the pleasure and the pain of creating a category for the security orchestration, automation response market. And so if you go back, I've got some bad YouTube videos from like 2013 where, before everyone entered the market, I'm sitting here trying to tell people this is a thing and no one cared. I think I like that aspect of being a pioneer and proving people wrong, because you get told no a lot when you're in category creation. Some people have the philosophy, why do category creation? It's a lot of work and it's risky. But like I said, Jason and I have done this before. If we're gonna do something fun, we're gonna be bold. Our branding really represents who we are. We're bold people. We're not conformists. If people want to say you need to be in this bucket, we're actually going to say, no, we don't. That's not what we need to do. So we want to be very different than everyone else, and we think we are in a category creation opportunity. Now, I will say the way markets evolve is it might be a category for a short amount of time that ends up consolidating into a larger play, which is what should happen. For the benefit of the customers, there should be a larger platform play that consolidates all the parts pieces. Could we end up being a feature market versus a product market? It could. It just depends on how much surface that we can go cover outside of where we are today. And we do see expansion opportunities to be able to go into areas that are still untapped, but adjacent to where we are, to create a larger detection platform, let's say deeper into Kubernetes, right? That's an opportunity. That's now going down the stack. Could we go up the stack into the application layer? Absolutely. Could we go into the pipeline and shift left that way? Absolutely. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to really go plow virgin ground that allows us to become a larger player. But if I was a fortune teller, I could tell you exactly where it's going to end up. I probably wouldn't be sitting here in front of you. I'd probably be in the beaches somewhere in Maui sipping a pina colada. So, but we feel like we're in white space that we have no problem being bold enough to go create a new space, because we have been told by a lot of people, just go after the current cloud security posture management market. That's easier. Well, easier in what way? I want to spend $100 million on sales and marketing to elevate above the noise? No thanks. I've been there. Don't want to do it.
What kind of roadmap you have for the company, or what are the things that are in the pipeline that you can share?
Yeah, I think for us, it's going to be what you talked about, expansion into other areas of either telemetry that we can build natively and collect natively, or integrating with other partners allow us to get that visibility and expand the visibility of what we're seeing in those environments. What we're talking about in terms of what are these identities doing in the environment, it's at the IaaS layer right now. We need to go further into the other parts that are connected by those layers at the infrastructure side and see what else they're doing. And so I think that's the biggest opportunity, is expand that visibility, expand the observability, and be able to detect evil in those different areas as well. So that's it. And we're going to go through this constant loop of more visibility, more observability, more visibility, more observability, right? You're going to go through that as you expand your reach into new data sets and new uncharted territories. So that'll be a constant evolution for us. And we want more of these threat researchers. I mean, we are, if we're in a net new market, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to find new ways of people who are trying to hack these environments. Jason, if you don't know, is also the proprietor of a hacker conference in Hawaii. If you ever get a chance, maybe he'll invite you out to ShakaCon. But that's where we come from. We come from that we know how to break things. We know how to find bad things. we're still in the beginning stages of that. We're not seeing it pop up pretty readily. You had a couple like Uber, Capital One, that were like the big name breaches. At the volume, it's not there yet. There's not a lot of volume. So there's a lot of area for us to go into that's untapped.
Yeah. And I think the only other big thematic thing would be to take our focus right now is in AWS largely, given market penetration of that platform, and expanding that into the other large cloud environments like Azure and GCP. But if we can't learn in AWS and really determine that we can execute on this finding evil mission in the cloud, going and expanding to the other clouds is just a waste of time, and for the most part at this point.
Since you're a Marvel fan, what's your superpower?
Oh, mine's easy. It's exactly what we're doing right now. I can talk all day long, and but in all seriousness, what I do enjoy is being very outwardly focused to understand what's happening in the market. What are the competitors doing? What are our customers saying? What are some of these larger vendors? My ability is really around, and this is what I talked about with market creation, category creation, right? You have to be bold enough to know, do I have the data on the market to say I am in a new category, and how do I start to shape this market? And I did this last time, and it was fun. And I want to keep my ear to the ground. And so I spent a lot of time talking to folks, talking to customers, and trying to get that understanding of where, when you're as old as we are in this market, a lot of investors say, oh, we can get you access to people. Access isn't the problem. I mean, that's not the issue. The issue really is, what's the signal right now? Where's the market going? How do we start to understand where we can move ourselves preemptively to get ahead of some of those market trends? That's my superpower for sure. I know what Jason's is, and I'm not very good at it, so I'll let him talk about his.
This is the yin and yang of Paul and Jason, co-CEO, right? So when we started this, one of the other things was, I'm not going to do a job that I don't wake up loving every day. That's just a choice that we have now. I am, although I've been a CEO and been an executive at a large public company, I'm more inward focused. I like spending time building team and culture and product. Where I like the outward focus is, and I think this is the superpower of our company actually as well, is with the customer and the prospects and understanding the problem and trying to bring that meaningful value to them. I mean, more than any other time in my career, we focus so much time on trying to understand the outcome of the customer and how we can make that the most efficient process as possible, and then have fun while doing it. The branding, we'll keep going back to that, but even our prospects will say, oh my God, I love this. It's not doom and gloom. It's not black mode. It's not red. You got a funny character. It's not for everyone, but it's for us. So yeah, I think that perfectly encapsulates the partnership between Paul and I and kind of the company focus.
Paul, Jason, thanks a lot for joining me today and share the story of the company. I can clearly see that there will be a lot of things that you folks will be doing. We'll be hearing a lot about the company. So I look forward to having you folks back on the show. And yes, Paul, you are a great storyteller. I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you. Really good. Thanks, Swapnil.
Thank you very much.